Lisa Demuth is the Speaker for the Minnesota House of Representatives. She could be the next governor of Minnesota. She's running to replace Governor Walz. Madam Speaker, thank you so much for coming on. We've spoken before about this. Here we are today. Tim Walz essentially was your sounding board until yesterday. Now we are learning that he is not seeking re-election. What do you attribute that to? Perhaps what is the buzz, if you will, there in Minnesota that you've heard about this?
Well, good morning, Sean. And while I was not surprised to hear the governor's announcement yesterday that he was not seeking a third term, the timing was a little surprising. I think the pressure and the exposure of how much fraud has been going on in Minnesota under his administration finally got to him. And whether it was his decision or the Democrats that made the decision for him, it was damaging, and they knew that. There are many more things that need to be fixed here in Minnesota because of the lack of leadership under the Governor Walz administration. But fraud has risen to the forefront, and that's what we are addressing now.
If you were able to move forward, become governor of your state, can you promise the people of Minnesota right now in this very moment that you would do your best, your utmost, to make this a priority, to allow no scandals, no fraud, no taxpayer dollars spent in an illegitimate manner? Can you make that promise?
I can absolutely make that promise, because fraud, whether it's a small amount or as large as what we're seeing it here, almost $9 billion suspected, is a theft of taxpayer dollars, both state and federal, on some of these programs. I will absolutely commit to the taxpayers, the voters, and the people of Minnesota that under my administration, if elected as governor, fraud will end day one, and people will be held accountable, both within my administration, if it's allowed to go on, or those fraudsters outside that are taking advantage.
I ask that because in his announcement, Governor Walz taking no accountability for the alleged massive fraud in his state. He is the CEO of that state. Instead, he sort of shifted the blame on President Trump. Watch this.
My administration has been taking fast, decisive action to solve this crisis. We'll win the fight against the fraudsters. But the political gamesmanship we're seeing from Republicans is only making that fight harder. We've got conspiracy theorist right-wing YouTubers breaking into our daycares, demanding access to our children. We've got the President of the United States demonizing our Somali neighbors and wrongfully confiscating funds that Minnesotans rely on. It's disgusting and it's dangerous.
That may not be the response that many in Minnesota obviously want to see. They want to see accountability, or I could have done a better job, and really get into the meat of it, but instead went on to attack the independent journalists that exposed the story, and then President Trump. And he targets the Somali community, or the treatment of the Somali community, but more than 100 arrested right around there and charged. 80 of those, it's 80%, were Somali. That is where this comes from. That is where the public record shifts this story to. That is why the spotlight is on the Somali community, specifically in Minnesota. What is your response to Governor Walz targeting Trump in that moment when he could have focused on the constituents, the taxpayers?
Governor Walz owes the taxpayers an apology, and now with his saying that he's not running for re-election, that's the answer that taxpayers needed in the state of Minnesota. He needs to take full responsibility and accountability, because this happened on his watch. He has never fired anyone, none of his commissioners, although in that statement he said that he has fired people. Sean, he's on record for saying he's never fired anyone about fraud. And so you're hearing confusing or misleading statements, even in his announcement yesterday. This is Governor Walz's responsibility and fault that fraud in Minnesota has exploded. He needs to take the full accountability and responsibility and apologize to the people of Minnesota.
Information. Truth is freedom. Is Newsmax. It's real news for real people.